The alarm started screaming at exactly 3 in the morning, station time. Red lights flashed through every corridor of Galactic Research Station Omega-7, turning the white walls into something that looked like the inside of a bleeding wound. Commander stood in the command center with his blue scales turning pale as he watched the containment monitors. The worst possible thing had happened. Specimen Zero was loose. The creature had been held in the deepest part of the station for 6 years now, ever since it was transferred from the previous facility it had destroyed. Before that, it had been moved 11 times across 200 years. Every single time, it eventually escaped. Every single time, people died. The Galactic Council called it the most dangerous organism ever documented, and they were not exaggerating. Specimen Zero was a void stalker, the last of a species that had wiped out 3 entire civilizations before anyone managed to capture it. Its home planet no longer existed, because the Council had destroyed it just to make sure no more of these things could ever be born. The creature looked like a giant cat from Earth, but that was where the similarities ended. Its fur was so black that it seemed to drink in the light around it. Its eyes changed colors based on its mood, and when they turned red, it meant death was coming. It could hide in any shadow, regulate its body heat to fool sensors, and its claws could cut through the hull of a starship like paper. Commander N had read the files. 47 confirmed kills across its containment history. Security teams with the best weapons in the galaxy had tried to stop it during previous escapes. Most of them ended up as statistics in those files. Dr. Kella Morn rushed into the command center, her silver skin glistening with sweat. She had spent 12 years studying Specimen Zero from behind reinforced glass and force fields. She knew its hunting patterns better than anyone alive. Right now, that knowledge made her more afraid than everyone else in the room. The creature is intelligent, she said to the commander. It does not just hunt, it thinks, it plans. It remembers every face that has ever caused it pain, and it has been caused a lot of pain over 2 centuries. And ordered a full lockdown. Every crew member was to seal themselves in the nearest safe room and wait for security teams to sweep the station. He watched on the monitors as his people scrambled through the corridors, fear driving them faster than any drill had ever managed. The station held over 300 souls, and every single one of them knew what was loose in the darkness with them. Security Chief Bram assembled his best team. They wore heavy armor and carried weapons designed to punch holes in armored vehicles. Even so, could see the fear in their eyes. He felt it himself, a cold knot in his stomach that no amount of training could untie. He gave them their orders: sweep deck by deck, maintain visual contact with each other at all times. If anyone saw the creature, they were not to engage alone. They were to call for backup and pray it arrived in time. The team spread out through the station like blood cells fighting an infection. Thermal cameras showed nothing useful because the creature could make itself invisible to heat detection. Motion sensors triggered constantly as panicked crew members moved through corridors they should have already cleared. The command center became a chaos of false alarms and growing terror. Down on Deck 12, far from the command center and the security teams, Danny Cole was just finishing his shift. He was 28 years old, born in a small town in Ohio, and he had been working as a maintenance technician on Omega-7 for 6 months now. It was not a glamorous job. He spent most of his time crawling through access tunnels and fixing broken environmental systems. But the pay was good, and he had always liked working with his hands. Danny had been deep inside a maintenance shaft when the alarm started. The sound was muffled down there, and by the time he crawled out and checked his communicator, the initial emergency broadcast had already passed. He saw the flashing red lights and knew something was wrong, but he did not know how wrong. He tried to contact the command center, but his communicator only gave him static. The maintenance shafts were notorious for dead zones in the communication network. He would need to get to a relay station or his quarters to get a clear signal. Danny looked at his options. The nearest safe room was 3 decks up, and he would have to pass through several major corridors to get there. His quarters were closer, just a 5-minute walk from where he stood. He could seal himself in there and figure out what was happening. He chose his quarters. The corridors were empty as he walked. His footsteps echoed against the metal floors in a way that made him uncomfortable. He had never seen the station this quiet before. Usually there were people everywhere, scientists and technicians and security officers going about their business. Now there was nothing but silence and those flashing red lights. Danny noticed the claw marks about halfway to his quarters, 4 deep gouges in the wall, cutting through metal like it was made of clay. He stopped and stared at them. His mind tried to come up with an explanation that did not involve something terrible, but it failed. Those marks were fresh. Whatever made them had passed through here recently. He started walking faster. His quarters were small but comfortable. A bed, a desk, a tiny bathroom, and a window that looked out at the stars. Danny sealed the door behind him and finally let himself breathe. He went to his personal terminal and pulled up the station broadcast. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. Specimen 0 had escaped from containment. All personnel were ordered to remain in secure locations. Security teams were conducting a sweep. Under no circumstances was anyone to approach or engage the creature. Danny had heard stories about Specimen 0. Everyone on the station had. It was the reason Omega-7 existed, the whole purpose of this facility floating in the middle of nowhere. He had never seen it himself, but he knew what it was capable of. He knew about the 47 kills. He sat down on the edge of his bed and tried to calm his racing heart. He was safe here. The door was sealed. Security would find the creature and contain it again. Everything would be fine. Then he heard something move behind him. Danny turned his head slowly, every muscle in his body going tight with fear. His quarters were small. There were not many places for something to hide, but the corner near his closet was dark, and something in that darkness was watching him. Two eyes opened in the shadows. They glowed a deep, terrible red. The deadliest creature in the galaxy had found him first. Danny could not move. His body had frozen in place like someone had poured ice water through his veins. The red eyes in the corner watched him without blinking. He could see the creature now, its outline becoming clearer as his eyes adjusted to the darkness. It was bigger than he had imagined. Its shoulders were as high as his chest, and its body was pure muscle wrapped in fur so black that it hurt to look at. The creature shifted its weight. Danny heard the soft click of claws against the metal floor. Each claw was as long as his finger and sharp enough to cut through starship hulls. He had read that in the safety briefings. He had thought it was an exaggeration. Looking at those claws now, he knew it was not. His mind raced through his options. The door was behind him, but he would never reach it in time. The creature could move faster than anything alive. He could try to fight, but that was laughable. Security teams with heavy weapons had failed against this thing. Danny had nothing but his bare hands and a maintenance toolkit. He could scream for help, but no one would arrive before the creature finished with him. The red glow in those eyes seemed to pulse brighter. Danny had read about that too. Red meant the creature was preparing to attack. Red meant death was seconds away. Something strange happened in Danny's mind. The fear was still there, but underneath it he felt a strange calm settling over him. Maybe it was because he knew he was going to die and there was nothing he could do about it. Maybe it was because panic would not help him anyway. Whatever the reason, Danny stopped trying to run or fight. Instead, he sat down on the floor. The creature tilted its head. It was a small movement, almost curious. Danny lowered his gaze, looking at the floor instead of directly at those burning eyes. He remembered something his grandfather had told him years ago, back when Danny was a boy and terrified of the neighbor's angry dog. Never stare down a scared animal, his grandfather had said. It makes them think you are challenging them. Look away. Make yourself small. Show them you are not a threat. Danny had no idea if that advice applied to an alien killing machine, but he had nothing else to try. He started talking. He did not know why exactly. Maybe he just wanted to hear a voice, even if it was only his own. Maybe he hoped that the sound would calm the creature somehow. He kept his voice low and soft, barely above a whisper. He talked about his back on Earth. He talked about the cornfields that stretched out forever under the summer sun. He talked about the old farmhouse where he grew up, with the creaky stairs and the kitchen that always smelled like his grandmother's cooking. He talked about Max, his childhood dog, a golden retriever who had been his best friend for 15 years. The creature did not move. It stayed in its corner watching him with those red eyes, but it did not attack. Danny kept talking. He talked about how he ended up in space. He had always loved fixing things, taking broken machines and making them work again. When the opportunity came to work on a station at the edge of known space, he took it without hesitation. He missed Earth sometimes, missed the feeling of wind on his face and grass under his feet. But the stars were beautiful out here, and the work kept him busy. Minutes passed. Danny lost track of how many. His voice grew hoarse, but he did not stop talking. He told the creature about the terrible food in the station cafeteria. He told it about the engineer who shared his shift and could not understand why humans needed to sleep so much. He told it about the little plant he kept in his quarters, a tiny fern that he had grown from a seed his mother sent him. Something changed in the creature's eyes. The red began to fade, slowly shifting to orange, then to amber. Danny noticed but did not react. He just kept talking, kept his voice calm and steady. The amber turned to gold. Danny felt exhaustion pulling at him. He had been working for 12 hours before the alarm started. His body was tired, and the fear had drained whatever energy he had left. He leaned back against his bunk, still sitting on the floor, and let his eyes close for a moment. He kept talking, but his words grew softer, slower. He was telling the creature about the lake near his, how he used to go fishing there with his father on summer mornings. The water was always so still at dawn, like a mirror reflecting the sky. His voice trailed off, his head drooped forward. Danny fell asleep. He did not hear the creature move. He did not feel the vibration of its footsteps as it crossed the small room. He did not know that the deadliest organism in the galaxy was approaching him with its golden eyes fixed on his sleeping face. The creature stopped in front of him. It lowered its massive head and sniffed the air around him. This human smelled different from the others. There was no weapon, no armor, no chemical sting of the tranquilizers they always tried to use. There was just the scent of sweat and machine oil and something else, something organic and warm. The creature had been alive for over 200 years. It had been captured, caged, and studied. It had been poked with needles and shocked with electricity and kept in boxes too small for it to move. Every being it had ever met had treated it like a thing, a monster, a problem to be controlled. This human had sat on the floor and talked to it like it was a friend. The creature circled once, twice, then lowered itself to the ground. It pressed its body against the sleeping human, feeling his warmth through its fur. It rested its massive head on his lap and closed its eyes. For the first time in 200 years, the Void Stalker was not alone. Danny's hand moved in his sleep, responding to some old instinct buried deep in his mind. His fingers found the creature's fur and began to stroke gently, the same way he used to pet Max all those years ago. A sound filled the small room. It was deep and resonant, almost too low for human ears to hear. It was the sound of a creature that had forgotten how to be anything but angry, finally remembering what it felt like to be at peace. The deadliest thing in the galaxy was purring. Commander N had not slept in 20 hours. His scales had turned from blue to an unhealthy shade of pale green, a sign of extreme stress in his species. The command center was filled with the sound of officers reporting in from across the station, and none of the news was good. 2 security officers were in the medical bay with deep wounds across their arms and chests. They had encountered the creature briefly on Deck 4, and they were lucky to be alive. The creature had torn through their armor like it was made of paper, but for some reason, it had not killed them. It had simply vanished back into the shadows, leaving them bleeding but breathing. Dr. Kella Morn stood beside the commander, studying the footage from Deck 4. She watched the creature attack, watched it stop, watched it disappear. Something was wrong with this escape. In every previous incident, Specimen Zero had killed without mercy. This time, it was holding back. Maybe it is playing with us, and said. His voice was tired and bitter. No, Morn replied. She pointed at the screen at the moment when the creature paused mid-attack. Look at its eyes. They are not red. They are amber. I have never seen that before during an escape. Before N could respond, a junior officer named Lisa Park spoke up from her station. Commander, we have a problem. One crew member has not checked in since the lockdown. And turned to face her. Who? Danny Cole, Park said. She pulled up his file on the main screen. Maintenance technician, assigned to Deck 12. His last known location was a maintenance shaft near Section 7. He never made it to a safe room. Deck 12 was close to where the creature had attacked the security officers, and felt his stomach tighten. If the creature had found this human before he reached safety, there would not be much left to find. Send a team, he ordered. Heavy weapons, full protective gear, and tell them to be ready for the worst. Security Chief Bram led the team himself. He had lost people to this creature before, at a different station years ago. He still had nightmares about what he had seen. The sounds, the blood, the way the creature had looked at him with those red eyes before disappearing into the dark. His team moved through Deck 12 with weapons raised and nerves stretched to breaking. Every shadow could hide death. Every corner could be their last. The emergency lights painted everything in shades of red, making it feel like they were walking through a nightmare. They reached Section 7 without incident. Danny Cole's quarters were at the end of the corridor. The door was sealed, which could mean the human had made it inside. It could also mean the creature had sealed it behind itself to enjoy its meal in private. Signaled for his team to take positions. They lined up on either side of the door, weapons aimed and ready. He entered the override code that would unseal any door on the station. The door slid open. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The scene in front of them was so far from what they had expected that their minds could not process it. Danny Cole was sitting against his bunk, fast asleep. His head had drooped forward, and his breathing was slow and steady. One of his hands rested on something dark and massive that was curled up on his lap. Specimen Zero was sleeping. Its enormous head was resting on the human's thigh, its eyes closed, its claws retracted. The sound coming from its chest was strange, a deep vibration that seemed to fill the room. It took several seconds to realize what the sound was. The creature was purring. "Lower your weapons," whispered. His voice was shaking. "Nobody make any sudden moves." The team obeyed, but their hands trembled as they did. Every instinct screamed at them to open fire, to kill this thing before it killed them. But the creature was not attacking. It was not even moving. It was just lying there like a giant, completely at peace. The commotion in the doorway woke Danny up. He opened his eyes slowly, confused at first. Then he looked down at the weight on his lap and his whole body went rigid with shock. "Oh," he said quietly, "that was not a dream." He looked up at the armed soldiers filling his doorway. He looked at their weapons and their pale faces. He looked back down at the creature that was still sleeping on him. "Please do not shoot," Danny whispered. "I think we are okay here." Commander and arrived minutes later, followed by Dr. Morn. They pushed through the crowd of security officers and stopped dead at the sight before them, and had been a soldier for 40 years. He had seen things that would break most beings, but he had never seen anything like this. Dr. Morn stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. Her eyes were wide as she studied the creature. She had watched Specimen Zero for 12 years through reinforced glass. She had seen it pace endlessly in its cell, seen the rage in its eyes, seen it throw itself against the barriers until it bled. She had never seen it sleep. "How did you do this?" she asked Danny. Her voice was barely a whisper. Danny shook his head slowly, careful not to disturb the creature on his lap. "I did not really do anything. I just sat down and talked to it. I did not try to run or fight. I just talked." "What did you say to it?" Danny thought about the question. "Everything, I guess. Just stories about my life. My dog, my family, nothing special." Dr. Morn stared at the creature for a long time. 200 years, she said quietly. "We have kept it in cages for 200 years. We poked it and tested it and treated it like a thing." She looked at Danny with something like wonder in her eyes. "Nobody ever just talked to it." The creature stirred. Its eyes opened, and immediately the security team raised their weapons again. The gold in its eyes began to shift, hints of red creeping in at the edges. Danny did something that made everyone in the room stop breathing. He scratched behind the creature's ear and spoke to it in a soft, calm voice. "Hey, it is okay. These are friends. Nobody is going to hurt you." The red faded. The gold returned. The creature closed its eyes and settled back down against Danny's lap. Commander and slowly lowered his weapon. He looked at Dr. Morn with a question in his eyes. She understood what he was asking. "This changes everything," she said. "If there is even a chance that this human can keep the creature calm, we need to study it. We need to understand it." She turned back to Danny, who was still gently stroking the fur of the deadliest creature in the galaxy. "I have an idea," she said, "but it is going to sound completely insane." The conference room on Deck 3 had never been so crowded. Commander sat at the head of the long table, his scales still that unhealthy pale green. Dr. Morn stood beside a holographic display showing images and data about Specimen Zero. Security Chief leaned against the wall with his arms crossed and a deep frown on his face. A dozen other senior officers filled the remaining seats, all of them looking exhausted and confused. Danny Cole sat at the far end of the table. He still wore his maintenance uniform, now wrinkled and stained with sweat. His hands were wrapped around a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. He looked like a man who had just woken up from a very strange dream and was not entirely sure he was awake yet. The creature was back in containment. It had allowed itself to be led there without resistance, as long as Danny walked beside it. When they reached the containment cell, the creature had looked at Danny with those golden eyes for a long moment before walking inside. Dr. Morn said it was the first time in recorded history that Specimen Zero had entered a cell voluntarily. Now they had to decide what to do next. "This is madness," said. His voice was sharp with frustration. "That thing has killed 47 people. We cannot just let it roam free because it likes one human." "I'm not suggesting we let it roam free," Dr. Morn replied. She tapped the holographic display, bringing up a new set of images. "I am suggesting we try something different. For 200 years we have treated Specimen Zero as a threat to be contained. We have put it in smaller and smaller boxes, surrounded it with more and more weapons. And what has that achieved? 17 escapes, 47 deaths. A creature that hates every living thing it encounters." She looked at Danny. "And then this human sits down on the floor and talks to it like it is a friend. He treats it with kindness instead of fear. And for the first time in 2 centuries, the creature responds with something other than violence." Commander and rubbed his eyes with one scaled hand. "What exactly are you proposing, Doctor?" Dr. Morn took a deep breath. "I propose that we create a new position on this station. A liaison. Someone whose job is to interact with Specimen Zero, to build a relationship with it, to understand its needs and behaviors." She gestured toward Danny. "And I propose that Mr. Cole be the first person to hold that position." The room erupted in arguments. Half the officers thought it was a brilliant idea that could revolutionize how the galaxy handled dangerous species. The other half thought it was suicide dressed up as science. Danny sat quietly through all of it. He was still trying to understand what had happened. He had spent his whole career fixing broken pipes and malfunctioning air filters. Now they wanted him to befriend the deadliest creature in the galaxy. Commander and raised his hand for silence. The argument stopped. He looked at Danny with something like respect in his eyes. "Mr. Cole," he said, "this is your life we are discussing. What do you want?" Danny thought about the question for a long time. He thought about the creature's eyes, the way the red had faded to gold. He thought about the weight of its head on his lap, the sound of its purring. He thought about what Dr. Morn had said, about 200 years in cages, 200 years of being treated like a monster. "I think it is lonely," Danny said finally. Everyone in the room turned to look at him. "It is the last of its kind. Its whole species is gone. Its planet is gone. For 200 years it has been locked in a box and poked with needles by people who are terrified of it." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "If I spent 200 years being treated like that, I would probably try to kill everyone who came near me too." Dr. Morn nodded slowly. "That is exactly my theory. The aggression is not inherent to the species. It is a response to trauma. Prolonged, severe, unending trauma." "So what do we do about it?" asked. His voice was still skeptical, but there was a hint of curiosity underneath. Danny looked at the security chief. "We try something different. We treat it like a living thing instead of a weapon. We give it space and companionship and patience. We show it that not everyone in the galaxy wants to hurt it." Shook his head. "And if it kills you in the process?" Danny smiled, a tired but genuine smile. "Then at least I will have tried. That is more than anyone else has done." The vote was not unanimous, but it passed. Commander and gave the order to begin construction on a new habitat attached to Danny's quarters. Dr. Morn would oversee the project, designing an environment that would meet the creature's physical and psychological needs. Danny would be given full access to the creature, with security monitoring from a distance. It took 3 weeks to build the habitat. Danny spent that time visiting the creature in its containment cell. At first, the creature would not come near him when others were watching. It stayed in the shadows, its eyes shifting between gold and amber. Danny sat on the floor outside the cell and talked to it anyway. He told it about the habitat being built, about the open spaces and climbing structures and plants that were being installed. Slowly, day by day, the creature began to move closer. It would press against the transparent barrier when Danny was there, watching him with those strange golden eyes. Sometimes it would make that deep purring sound, so low that Danny felt it in his chest more than heard it with his ears. Dr. Morn documented everything. She had spent her whole career studying dangerous creatures, and she had never seen anything like this. The creature's vital signs changed when Danny was present. Its heart rate slowed. Its stress hormones decreased. It was responding to his presence the way a social animal responds to a member of its pack. On the day the habitat was completed, Danny walked the creature from its containment cell to its new home. The whole station held its breath as the deadliest thing in the galaxy followed a maintenance technician through the corridors like a loyal dog. When they reached the habitat, the creature explored every corner, every climbing structure, every plant. Then it walked back to Danny and pressed its head against his chest. Danny put his arms around its neck and held on. Dr. Morn watched from behind a transparent barrier, tears running down her silver face. She had spent 12 years trying to understand this creature. She had written papers about its hunting patterns and aggression responses and escape behaviors. She had thought she knew everything there was to know about Specimen Zero. She had been wrong. A human with no scientific training and no special equipment had taught her more about the creature in one night than she had learned in a decade. And the lesson was so simple that it hurt. Sometimes the most dangerous thing in the galaxy just needs someone to be kind to it. 6 months had passed since the night that changed everything. Galactic Research Station, Omega-7, was no longer the tense and fearful place it had been. The red emergency lights had not flashed once since Danny Cole became the station's first liaison. The creature that had terrorized the facility for years now padded through the corridors with golden eyes and retracted claws, following Danny like a shadow made of midnight fur. The crew had started calling it Shadow. Danny did not know if the creature understood its name, but it seemed to respond when he used it. It would lift its massive head and look at him with those strange, ancient eyes. Sometimes Danny thought he could see intelligence there, a mind that had survived for over 200 years and remembered every kindness and every cruelty it had ever received. Shadow's habitat had become the most popular spot on the station. Off-duty crew members would stop by to watch the creature lounging in the artificial sunlight or climbing the structures Danny had helped design. At first, Shadow would tense up when strangers appeared. Its eyes would shift toward Amber, and its claws would extend just slightly. But Danny would put his hand on the creature's back and speak softly, and the tension would fade. Slowly, Shadow learned to tolerate the presence of others. It would never be tame, not really. It was still the apex predator of a dead world, still capable of destruction that most beings could not imagine. But it had learned that not everyone wanted to hurt it. It had learned that the cage was open and it could choose to stay. Dr. Kella Morn spent hours every day observing and documenting. She had abandoned her old research entirely. Everything she thought she knew about Specimen Zero was wrong. The creature was not a mindless killing machine. It was a highly intelligent, deeply traumatized survivor. Its aggression had been a defense mechanism, a response to centuries of abuse. Take away the abuse, replace it with patience and kindness, and the creature transformed into something entirely different. Her new research papers were causing waves across the galaxy. Other facilities were reaching out, asking questions about the Omega-7 approach. Could it work with other dangerous specimens? Could kindness really be more effective than containment? The Galactic Council sent observers to study what was happening. 3 representatives from 3 different species arrived on a transport ship, carrying data pads and skeptical expressions. They expected to find a carefully controlled experiment with heavy security measures. They found Danny Cole sitting on the floor of the habitat, reading a book on his tablet while Shadow dozed with its head on his knee. The observers stayed for 2 weeks. They watched Danny interact with the creature. They studied Dr. Morn's research. They interviewed the crew, who all told variations of the same story. The human treated the monster like a friend, and the monster decided to stop being a monster. When the observers left, they carried a recommendation that would change galactic policy. The old methods of containment were not working. Fear and force only created more dangerous creatures. It was time to try something new. Commander N had changed too. The pale green was gone from his scales, replaced by a healthy blue. He no longer walked the corridors expecting disaster. He had started to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had found a real solution. He stood in the observation room one evening, watching Danny and Shadow through the transparent barrier. The creature was awake now, playing with a ball that Danny had introduced to its habitat. It batted the ball across the floor, chased it, caught it in its teeth. It looked like a giant kitten, and it had to remind himself that this same creature had once torn through armored security teams without breaking a sweat. Dr. Morn joined him at the barrier. She had a data pad in her hands, but she was not looking at it. She was watching Shadow with an expression of pure wonder. "The Council has approved expansion of the program," she said. "They want to establish similar relationships with other high-risk specimens across the galaxy. They are asking for human volunteers. And nodded slowly. Humans, they have a gift for this sort of thing. Morn smiled. They do. Other species see dangerous creatures and feel fear. Humans see them and feel curiosity. They want to understand, to connect. She looked at him with something like respect in her eyes. We have been trying to control the galaxy's most dangerous beings for thousands of years. Maybe we should have been trying to befriend them instead. Inside the habitat, Danny had finished playing with Shadow and was preparing for bed. His quarters were connected to the habitat now, a door that was never locked between them. Shadow could come and go as it pleased, and it usually pleased to sleep at the foot of Danny's bed. A young officer appeared at the habitat entrance. Her name was, and she had joined the station just a month ago. She was still nervous around Shadow, but she was learning to hide it. "Mr. Cole," she said, "I have a question if you have time." Danny looked up from his book. "Of course, what is it?" Glanced at Shadow, who was watching her with calm golden eyes. "That night when you first met it, how did you know it would not kill you?" Danny considered the question for a long moment. He thought about the red eyes in the darkness, the claws that could cut through steel, the fear that had frozen him in place. He thought about sitting down on the floor and talking about his and his dog and his grandmother's cooking. "I did not know," he admitted. "I was terrified. I thought I was going to die." "Then why did you do it? Why did you sit down and talk to it instead of running or fighting?" Danny smiled, that same tired but genuine smile he had worn in the conference room 6 months ago. "My grandfather used to say that every creature, no matter how dangerous, just wants to feel safe. He said fear is not the opposite of courage. Fear is what makes courage possible." He scratched Shadow behind the ears, and the creature's eyes drifted closed with pleasure. "I was afraid. But being afraid did not mean I had to be cruel. I could choose to be kind instead." Looked at Shadow, at the peaceful expression on its face, at the complete trust it showed in the human beside it. That choice saved a lot of lives. Danny nodded. "Maybe, but I think it did something more important than that. I think it gave this creature a reason to want to live instead of just survive." He looked at Shadow with deep affection. For 200 years, everyone treated it like a monster, so it became one. Then someone finally treated it like it mattered, and it became something else entirely. Shadow opened one eye and looked at Danny with an expression that might have been gratitude. It might have been love. It might have been something that had no name in any language because no one had ever seen a void stalker feel it before. The deadliest creature in the galaxy had finally found a home. And the galaxy had learned a lesson it would never forget. Humans were not the strongest species or the most advanced, but they had something that no other species could quite match. They had the ability to look at something terrifying and choose to see a friend. It was the most human thing in the universe. And it changed everything.